Hey, what's up, everybody? Welcome back to the Rogues Passage podcast. I'm Tanner Cherry, joined by my two co-hosts.
I'm Brando.
I am the wonderful Wizard Oz.
And what do you know? We're here to talk about the brackets. They have finally landed. If you haven't noticed, you're living under a rock in the world of Magic the Gathering or Commander. It's big. It's, I guess, controversial, and we're just doing an impromptu chat. We're just gonna discuss it. How do you guys feel?
I'm kind of torn. I think the idea is good, but I think that it requires a heck of a lot more work than even they at Wizards of the Coast realize, because it needs some serious updating, and they need to quantify a lot of cards to make the system work, in my opinion.
And Oz?
I mean, honestly, it's a tough thing to cover because Magic is such a... Well, it's the most complicated game that's ever existed. Someone's made a Turing machine out of playing cards. Yep. So, like, to be able to, like, have everything just funnel down into one perfect little list of everything, it's just not going to happen. But
yeah, I mean, I would assume, I guess, for our audience and everyone else, like, if go check out the website, get up to spec on what exactly they've introduced. There's 5 brackets that are supposed to be descriptive of play experiences and stuff. And again, like they said that it's a beta. I'm glad that they said it's a beta because it's like, here's where we're starting, and the only way to actualize where we're going to end up is to release it into the wild and like stress test it.
Yeah.
So of course it's not perfect.
It's not perfect, and I mean, it makes sense, and it's smart for them to sit back and be like, there's obviously work that they've put in, and probably a long list of stuff that they're trying to figure out as well. But to put it out as a beta and be like, hey, we're going to need the help of the overarching community of Magic to help sort this out. It's smart, it's good, and it's exactly what this thing needs. Because it was the same thing with the rules committee, right? Is a bunch of the complaints when it kind of got disbanded and fell apart is, how do you have a small group of people deciding this same sort of thing for what is millions of players?
Yeah, that was like the biggest complaint, right? It was just like a small tribunal of people that like made earth-shattering decisions sometimes in this, small room without really in the latest Commander ban stuff in September, without really addressing their appointed advisors, right? Like not really using the resource that they built to stress test like decisions like that. I think it's very promising that they took the time they were going to release this at MagicCon Vegas last year, and they were like, it's not going to be anywhere near ready. They took their time on it, and what they've got it's interesting. Personally, I'd like to say that it's nice to see that they're talking about play experience rather than just power level 1 through 10, because the entirety of the format is not just about power level. Like, so there's especially the fact we've got exhibition tier number 1, your ultra casual Commander deck, is not about what power it is. It's not about what winning or it's a totally different way to play the game. So now they've actually got language for that in a certain category.
Oh yeah, no, and even for posterity, let's go through this list here.
Mm-hmm. One was ultra casual exhibition.
Yeah, ultra casual Commander deck, no mass land denial or extra turns, no 2-card infinite combos, no game changers, which we'll get to a bit here, and few tutors. Got 2 core, the average current pre-constructed deck. No mass land denial, no chaining extra turns. So I'm assuming that means that an extra turn or 2-card in there makes sense, but no, hey, oops, I'm going to take 13 extra turns.
Yep.
Still no 2-card infinite combos, no game changers, again, few tutors. We've got 3 upgraded beyond the strength of an average pre-con deck. No mass land denial, no chaining extra turns. This one allows for late game 2-card infinite combos, so that'd be Sanguine Bond and Exquisite Blood.
Yep, stuff like that.
You've got to get, and then it says up to 3 game changers, which I'm sure is going to kind of shift and change because even the list of game changers they have right now is small.
Yeah, it's 40 cards.
It's 40 cards out of like 30,000 that exist in Magic. It's probably going to get some buffing.
Yeah, and then we've got so those three, they kind of communicated that those are the social tiers where people want to play games in a social environment, like sitting down with your boys and playing some poker. You know, like it's different when you're hosting a poker tournament at your house and everybody just wants to like enjoy each other's company than it is to go to the casino or to a tournament, right? And like, and there's a lot of people like bracket 4 here. I'll say is optimized. They're describing this as high power commander. Like, there's no restrictions other than the ban list. That's the rules. If you're playing at high power, time to go wild, gloves off. But then they've got tier 5 CEDH. It's high power with a very competitive and metagame focused mindset. And I'm personally so glad that they like said those words, because that's how I've always felt about CEDH, is that there's people that are like, oh, well, that's a CEDH deck. And it's like, well, not really, because it wouldn't hold a candle at a tournament. It wouldn't. It doesn't have the focused, pinpointed selection of cards that are good in the meta, that are good against Orcish Bowmasters or this and that. You know, like, it's not a selected list made for a competitive environment. That is like the most powerful decks on steroids.
Yeah, and to be clear about that too, like level 4 and level 5 is like a level 4 deck or a bracket 4 deck would probably be able to exist at a table with bracket 5. There's a good chance it could take some wins.
Yep.
But the difference because it's not listed here, and I'm sure it will get to that point, is like the big difference between what would be bracket 5 CEDH and bracket 4 is that bracket 5 is, again, it's the meta game. It's that every single card in a list is effectively working towards what is that inevitable win, which generally tends to be on turn 1, 2, or 3, where bracket 4 is going to exist in maybe it's running some of those cards, but that's where you're going to start having maybe somebody includes their pet cards, maybe somebody is doing something that's slightly off the meta but could still work, where still a chance you're going to win, but it's going to be an uphill battle against the bracket 5 decks.
Yeah. So what is the first thing that stood out to you? Oz, maybe you jump in on this. What's the first thing that stood out to you as something you think could need work or may not work as is?
Through the brackets or
just the whole system they've introduced.
Well, one of the biggest things is that having these special cards that are these power cards don't really represent the power of a deck. That's if you are running tutors and those tutors are high proficiency tutors, but your deck is not doing something that is high proficiency, then really your deck isn't as strong. Or if you have a deck that's really meta and is, if you're running Dragon's Approach or something like that, Dragon's Approach it will just go off, but technically it's not part of those. And so there's other decks that skirt around it and, oh, no, this deck is a 2. And so it's what we really are battling against is people that are going to follow this and not use their brain. They're just going to turn off the brain and go, no, this is a 2 because it falls within the 2 system, instead of just knowing that this deck is far more powerful than what the brackets would allow it to be.
Yeah, one thing,
especially in the current setting.
One thing that I'd like to jump on is the fact that like the overall discourse. God, I watched on lunch today. I watched Maldhound's video about it, and like thank the Lord for him, because he will say it straight and he will say it crass, and it's just like there's too many people. And I do believe it's kind of like a really, you're not putting much thought into it when you're just like, oh, my deck says that it's a 2 because Moxfield says that it's a 2, but it's X, Y, and Z. And it's like, okay, well, you're choosing not to appreciate or represent the fact that they have said that, like, it doesn't work off of just the way that Moxfield or Architect rates your deck. It works off, like, you also have to be honest about what your deck does, and you also have to be honest about what tier it is in. And we're going to be in the same situation as we always were with that. There's always bad actors. There's always people that are dishonest, and we will never ever not have that. unfortunately. So it's like the fact that you can't really point to that as being a knock on this system, because it's like a knock on the system that no system has or will ever conquer. Like if someone's going to be misrepresenting, they're always going to do that.
It's not a thing on the system, more so it's people that are going to go by the letter of the law and not the spirit of it.
Yeah, I
And
agree with
Exactly.
that, yeah.
Well said.
And so as long as we understand, and them coming out and saying that it's a beta right off the bat makes it so much easier to say, no, we can go by the spirit of this because you're following it by the letter. And it's a beta, so we can't do that.
Yeah.
And so
Yeah.
it makes it a lot easier for us to actually suss out those bad actors on that sort of thing and be able to say, let's follow this by the spirit of what we're trying to get done here.
Yeah.
And what we're trying to make sure that when people go to a competition, well, not a competition, but if you go and sit at a table with a bunch of randos, you can say, okay, I'm playing in a bracket 3 here, actually a bracket 3, not because 3 is the new 7, but that other people will actually come and say, oh, okay, yeah, because you're playing a 3, I can play a 3 or a 2 or something that's going to play at that level instead of
And that's it, is that it's developed as a, like, the big thing is that, like, this might not be for you. This might be never applicable to an advanced player or a very enfranchised player, but it's very, very helpful when you go to a MagicCon that has thousands of people and they're just trying to match make a Commander game. It is actually, I think it's really helpful. Let's talk about like bracket 3, which I think most people's decks are going to sit in, right? No mass land denial and no chaining extra turns. These are actual rules now that people have to abide by if they want to sit down and say, I'm playing it at bracket 3. Whereas before, people would say that my deck is a power 6 or a power 7, but there's no definition or no like heuristics whatsoever in regards to what, like how someone can base the power level of their deck. But now, you know, like bracket 3, you're okay to play the Sanguine Bond Exquisite Blood combo. But like it encourages like, maybe to close out a game later on. You don't want to race to it as quick as possible with tutors and stuff. And then they're saying, here's these list of like really, really powerful cards that have been pressuring the format for a long time. And we're going to say, keep it to about 3. And the thing is, if you sit down, you're like, my list has 4. Is it okay? And people are going to be like, yeah, that's cool. You know, like there's still rule 0 involved, but at least now, like there's actual things that someone can point to appropriately find a bracket 3 table. And I do think that it's going to get more well-defined as things go on.
I agree. I like, especially like it being more refined as time goes on, because as it stands right now, I don't think the current setup, all of the list of cards that they have, or even just like the specific rules that they have in place perfectly work yet. Even just looking at Moxfield, as the primest example, we have decks here. Like my 2 top examples for the disparity here is my 12th Doctor Grixis build, which Oz has experience having played in a casual game and drawing half the deck, and the other half of the deck was in exile to be able to cast and copy and all this stuff. And he's like, this is outrageously amazing. This is awesome. Where's the win con? Way for that deck to functionally win, other than, oops, maybe somebody else's life total got brought down enough that I swing in with a creature, but it's not like the game plan of the deck. It's sitting at a 4. In the current bracket, because it has tutors, it has game changers, like there's Rhystic Study and all that stuff in there. It is, I would never say that it would be a bracket 4 deck. I'd probably call it a bracket 2 at most, but I'd probably say it's a bracket 1 in the spirit of what this list says so far.
And that's how, like, people, like, you know how the deck plays or works or is built, and you know that it's, in actuality, it sits more around a 2. But yeah, that is going to be a hard thing, because if you play it and you do sneak out a win, someone's going to be like, well, man, like you played like 4 or 5 of the game changer cards or something, right? It's like you're lying about your bracket level, right? So I can see
comparison.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Look, because comparatively to that, I'll keep this quick. There's my Helga deck, which is, as both of you have seen, probably one of my strongest decks to date. And it, funnily enough, is being called Bracket 2 because there's no tutors in it. There's none of the good stuff cards. Because like it doesn't have a Rhystic Study because there's other things that are doing a better job, in my opinion, than Rhystic Study. But to call it a Bracket 2 is like inherently false. And we can leave this for a little bit.
I'm struggling with the same thing.
Yeah. Because I think realistically one of the big things that needs to happen and is going to be happening, because obviously we're in a beta here, is that more cards need to be considered part of the game changers list. Because they may not always sit the same in every deck, but for the decks that they do, like certain cards excel more in certain decks. And it's there's a lot to quantify here. Even when it comes to the no chaining extra turns for a number 3, or for bracket 2 and bracket 3, you might put an extra spell deck or an extra spell card in the deck and not realize that your deck can potentially chain it, and then stumble in by accident. Or one of those situations where just like, I was never meant to be able to do this, but nobody interacted with my board, so I have these 8 pieces. I have these 8 cards that have just turned the deck into like, it plays like it should be bracket 4 now, built to be a bracket 2. Like there's a lot of work that needs to be done to fine tune this.
So
but you are correct, Tanner, on the a lot of it does come down to just turn 0 discussion of what do you think your deck is.
Yeah, I struggle with it also because I've got an Omnath deck, Omnath Locust of Mana, mono green, plays some it's mono green things that are not together would be considered very threatening, but apart from each other are not very are not going to be making this deck the worst thing in the world. And so honestly, I put it into when I put it into Archaeodeck, or it comes up as a 2. I know it's not a 2. I know
it's proxy. It's like almost CEDH, right? It's like right on the line.
It's right on the line. It'll punch out a game turn 5, turn 6 if it can. Now, on the flip side, I have Genju, or Goshintai, which is it's all lands. It's so and it is considered a 5 just because of the tutors and the card draw that it has in it to get its janky combo to go off.
Yep.
Now, I don't think that would play any stronger than a 3. And if it was at a table stronger than a 3, I think it would get eaten alive. And so honestly, it's one of those things that you judge it accordingly, but it's hard to fit those game changer cards into making what would be like to fit inside those brackets.
Yeah. So Brandon and I were having, like, we just tipped on a discussion in our chat, and I was like, no, we got to save this for the podcast, because if we're talking about the power level of cards that maybe should find their way onto the game changer list to be accurate and helpful, Brandon, you want to? Well, yeah, you go ahead and make your point.
Okay. I'm gonna keep this as condensed as I can because there's like a lot to unpack here. As soon as I saw that they had updated Moxfield for this, I immediately started looking through my decks and being just like, okay, cool. Like, where do they sit in brackets? Blown away by the fact that some decks that are very bad are sitting in higher brackets than my decks that are very good. One of the things that I noticed, though, is one of the auto includes for game changer cards is Rhystic Study. And now I understand this. I completely agree with this. Rhystic Study is a game changer card. But I immediately was thinking, and I brought it up before, my Helga deck, which in place of a Rhystic Study, I'm using a Beast. Yeah, I'm using a Beast Whisperer. Which, to me, I think Beast Whisperer needs to be added to the game changer list, because a deck that's going to play Beast Whisperer properly is going to probably see more benefit on average, in my opinion, than a Rhystic Study. Where Rhystic Study, right, as an example, I play Rhystic Study, I pass the turn. Opponent casts a spell, they decide to not pay the 2, I draw 1 card. They pass the turn. second player in rotation or third player in rotation casts a spell. They do pay the 2. I don't get that card. They pass the turn.
Pay the 1?
Or yeah, pay the 1. Yeah,
Yeah.
pay the 1. I don't draw that card. Last player in turn order does the same thing. They cast a card. They pay the 1. I don't draw a card. On that turn rotation, I've drawn 1 card. If counter to that, if I'm playing Beast Whisperer and I'm playing it in a deck that cares about creatures, so I'm playing a heavy creature-based deck, probably a lot of low to the ground mana dorks, I cast a spell. Or I cast a creature spell. I draw a card. If that's a creature spell, I cast that creature spell. I draw a card. If that's a creature spell, I cast that spell. I draw a card. If there's other effects in the deck, Abundance, Teferi's Ageless Insight, things that are like letting me kind of craft that draw a little bit better, that could be, and through experience that you guys have seen in my Helga deck, oops, that's my entire board or my entire deck on the battlefield in 1 turn. Rhystic Study doesn't have that power. It never did. What I think. Let me just finish the one point.
All right.
If there's one thing that I think that made Rhystic Study an auto include and why they haven't looked at, and I do think that they're going to add things like Beast Whisperer to the game changer list, is that Rhystic Study is a tax effect. And so it goes out of its way as a card to draw the ire of players, because now I'm asking you a question every single turn. And that itself builds a nuance of, I now have to focus on something that's not mine, which some people are either annoyed at or other people see as this is a strong effect because their focus is being pulled specifically to the fact that Rhystic Study is on board. Where Beast Whisperer or things similar don't see that effect because you're never really experiencing the player bothering you. You can go brain dead, focus, watch the butterflies on the other side of the room while this person's chaining off with Beast Whisperer, and you're never really going to matter or care until everything's said and done.
Yeah. So yeah, right away I was just like, ooh, I don't agree with that at all. And I wanted to save it for the podcast to bring up why I believe that Rhystic Study is a tier or multiple tiers above a card like Beast Whisperer, and why it does definitely I don't think Beast Whisperer should ever be on that list, because the situation that you've described, let's talk about the most common way to play Rhystic Study and the most common way to play Beast Whisperer. Rhystic Study, you're likely going to have it on turn, let's say 2 if you had a Soul Ring, or turn 3 if you didn't, or whatever. Beast Whisperer, you're, let's say 3 or 4. Green decks are good at ramping, so yeah, let's say they're both turn 3 spells.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Beast Whisperer, you're going to spend in your whole mana to cast it, and then you have to wait until you get around to your next turn until you then have to take actions and spend resources and spend mana and have the cards in your hand. Like, these other things all have to line up for you to get any value off of it. Rhystic Study, if you cast it right away and you tap out for it, you everybody else is on their foundational turns, like building turns. You're going to get 2 or 3 cards through that next turn cycle, and you didn't have to invest any resources. And then we're in a position that Rhystic Study will continue that path while also threatening to tax people if they want to pay into it. Beast Whisperer, I mean, the situation that you described is that you, if you're drawing another creature and casting another creature and drawing another creature and casting another creature, you're also suggesting that you also had to have an immense amount of mana resources to spend to keep the chain going. So there's all these other things that Beast Whisperer requires of you to be an all-star. And its power level is good, but it's throttled by, do you have the things to back it up? Rhystic Study never asks a single thing of you. It's so annoying to play against because people, when they do feel they need to pay into it, they're losing tempo and resources, right? You get value whichever thing they choose, and you never have to invest a certain thing into it for the rest of the game, right? So I think that those cards, the cards that should be on the list, are cards that when they hit the battlefield, they require nothing. They require no synergy. They are just the most powerful cards in the slot of draw ever made. And that's the crazy part, is a lot of people talk about cards where they're oh, well, if you have this and this and this, then it's game over. And it's well, yeah, but you have to have those other things, right? So I do think that Rhystic Study sits in a class of its own, because if it hits the battlefield, I mean, it's one thing to talk about either one of them being removed. Yeah. I do think that you get an obscene amount of value off Heuristic Study for 3 mana. Beast Whisper,
I completely agree with that.
you get an obscene amount of money off Beast Whisper for spending dozens of mana in the previous turns, or in the subsequent turns. So like, I don't think, and also I was trying to look up the salt score. I don't know how to find the salt score of a card. Beast Whisper, it doesn't list one. And I know
I mean, that's kind of my point of just like Rhystic Study, even just being a tax effect. If Rhystic Study, this would be objectively way more broken. But if Rhystic Study read, whenever a player casts a spell, you just draw a card, its salt score, and I know this is probably going to be a little controversial, I think its salt score would come down because it's not a tax effect, right? Now it's just, oh, that's a good stuff card that's drawing you stuff whenever people do things. But it's that tax effect that gets in people's heads, and it's like, this makes me salty because now every fucking turn I'm being asked, do you pay the 2? Do you pay the 1? Do you pay your taxes?
You're making it someone else's choice a little bit, and either choice is bad.
I agree with what you're saying. I do still think
actually I sit in the middle between you guys because because I see the benefit from like Beast Whisper, but I also know that a board wipe takes that out immediately, and it's also subject to removal far easier because it's a creature.
Yeah, I was going to say that in regards to, if you look at 100,000 commander decks, whatever removal suite a deck has, I would say that the higher chunk of it would hit a Beast Whisper, and a smaller 100%. Chunk of it would hit a Heuristic Study or an artifact.
I 100% agree.
Yeah.
The reason that it balanced out in my mind specifically, and then I've got a couple of stats that I want to go over, and then we can kind of move on from this so it doesn't just eat up the whole time, is the whole notion that because everything that you guys have said about Heuristic Study is true, and I agree with it. It's obviously a card that needs to stay on the Game Changer list. It's the fact that it is a tax effect. As long as everybody pays their taxes, which people are notoriously bad for, so many players just let the tax man come and take all the cards he wants. If anybody pays that 1, which if it was anything more, it would be way detrimental. If you pay 1 mana and they don't draw that card, Heuristic Study is a dead card. It's 3 mana to, oops, I never get any benefit off.
That's not true. It is still taxing each of your opponents each turn. Everybody's spells cost 1 more, which is like a Thalia or Grand Arbiter, which I guess is also on the list, right?
Yeah, but that's just what I mean. Like, it's not that I'm saying that it doesn't have an effect. I just mean that it's like, it's no benefit to the player who's casting it other than like, there's a tax effect sort of thing. Where Beast Whisper doesn't have that, it's self-contained. So I think that they balance out, right? Heuristic Study is better in the fact that it is taxing your opponents, but Beast Whisper allows for more potential chaining. I think that they kind of meet in the middle there. I'm just saying that's like Beast Whisper should, and other cards too that haven't made it to that list yet.
Better than both of them, I would say, is going to be a Consecrated Sphinx.
Oh,
yeah.
Maybe.
Con Sphinx was not on the list, was it?
No.
I wonder if it's because it's a 6 mana card, because it is very, very explosive, right?
Yeah. Yeah. So just to bring up stats, because as soon as you said that, like in the group chat, that it's like you didn't quite agree with it, and I'm like, okay, I've got to find all the math that I can to prove this point. So I looked up Heuristic Study and Beast Whisper on EDH Direct. Heuristic Study is in roughly 700,000 decks of the decks that are like on EDH Rec.
Yep.
Of its top 3 commanders that use that is Atraxas Praetor's Voice, Kinnan Bonder Prodigy, and Urza Lord Artificer. It's used in 32% of Atraxa decks. It's used in 67 of Kinnan decks, and it's used in 61% of Lord or of Urza Lord High Artificer decks.
Okay.
Beast Whisper, on the other hand, is roughly about 300,000 decks. So you've got a disparity there, but to that, the disparity is that Beast Whisper is good in creature matters or creature heavy decks, where Heuristic Study can obviously go in any deck that's blue and see performance, which is another point to exactly, I agree, Heuristic Study is a little bit better than Beast Whisper. Yeah. But when you look at the top 3 commanders for Beast Whisper, Lathril, Blade of the Elves, Animar, Soul of Elements, and Voja, Jaws of the Conclave, it's in 81% of Lathril decks, it's in 67% of Animar decks, and it's in 71% of Voja decks. Which, just looking at that, means that on average, Beast Whisper is seeing more play in its top decks than Heuristic Study is.
Yeah, interesting.
And that's one of the stats that I'm talking about, where it's like, it's a card that is an auto include for Creature Matters decks because it does perform incredibly well and does provide explosive turns. And that's just what I mean. I'm not saying that we should devalue Rhystic Study. I just think that Beast Whisperer should be put in that list.
Yeah, the reason that I feel like it's safe is because it requires that like everything else is going so good for you. Like it does require that you've had essentially free range to set up and build to a point where you can pop with it, right?
Yeah.
And that's like a bit of a release valve. Like, have you ever met somebody that is like really salty or like does not like Beast Whisperer showing up?
I've encountered it once before. It's never, I'll 100% stipulate, it's never the kind of salt that people get from Rhystic Study. But I did have a game probably like 2 years ago sort of thing where I like played a Beast Whisperer, and this player just was like hell bent on trying to destroy Beast Whisperer with all of their might. Like every spell, even past counter spells and this and that, like every spell that they could try to destroy Beast Whisperer, because it's just like, what are you guys doing ignoring that? It's gonna draw him, it's drawing him so many cards.
They got the respect for it, right?
Yeah.
They've seen what it can do.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I did actually, I who was it? I was listening to Magic Mike's again today, and one of the hosts, Daquan Watson, he's on the 18-person panel, like the Commander format panel. And he's been kind of the one that I've heard that's divulging more of the just table talk of how this whole process has gone. And he was the one saying that like the whole team does not agree, right? Even Josh on the game nights or whatever. Command Zone. He was talking about how it was very tumultuous. Like it was very difficult to get to this. And they essentially put like a Google or like a spreadsheet, like a Google form for everybody to submit like what they thought would be on that list, what that list would be called, stuff like that. And they were like, man, there was people that were like, we got to put 200 cards on this list, right? And there was other people that were like, 200 cards is going to be a detriment to people wanting to adopt it or being able to memorize it or whatever, right? So there was an active, like, let's try and keep the list low to start and try at all costs to stop, like, to prevent us from putting too many cards on the list. But they did say for sure that like we started with the 40 that everybody basically agreed on. And then let's go from there, right? I know that like it was funny seeing just 2 red cards on there. I mean, Deflecting Swat didn't make it on, but like I guess
I get that. No, Deflecting Swat is not that good of a card, especially in the realm. Deflecting Swat is the one where if you control your commander, you may cast it for free.
Yep.
Right?
Yep.
Yeah. It's the weakest out of that like round of cards.
I disagree, but okay.
I'm not saying it's a bad card. I'm not saying it's a bad card. Every single time that we have players, and we've cut it out of episodes that we've put on the channel because people keep fucking up how to cast this spell. It's a good card, but it's kind of not that good because it's only for one target to redirect to another target. And everybody misplays it. Somebody plays a Decimate and they're like, oh, I'm going to do this. It's like, no, you have to choose a spell that has a single target. A Path to Exile, a Swords to Plowshares, absolutely. It's great for those. A lot of people play things that have more interaction or more targets, and everybody misplays that card so much.
Yeah, I do agree that people misplay it because it's a big brain card. But it's, I guess, brother or sister. Fierce Guardianship is on the list, and Fierce Guardianship's just negate. It's just negate,
but it's a free negate. It's a zero cost counter spell. It's
free negate with setup, right? It's not always like Force of Will is not always free either. You have to have another blue card in your hand, and so there's like Fierce Guardianship. I find it funny.
Fierce Guardianship only hits instants or sorceries?
No, it is a countered on creature spell, like negate.
Yeah.
Okay.
So it's not a counter spell. You can't counter a creature spell. But yeah, you get every so often it's free. It does warp the game heavily when somebody can tap out on their entire turn and still hold up counter magic to, like, Force of Will is famous for that. It regulates entire formats, right? It might be too powerful for Legacy, but it has to stay in, otherwise everything goes out the window, right? But yeah, it's interesting. We could probably talk for weeks and months, and we will, about all the cards that could and should be on the list.
Ooh.
But can I add one more
right
away?
Steedborn Muse.
Oh yeah, hey, like
Ooh,
Seedborn
yeah.
Muse is, it's again, it's
Untap
one of those
each.
cards, does not require really anything else to be as explosive as it is. If it is on the battlefield, it is doing God's work in every turn that you like. Yeah, it's nuts.
Yeah.
That's a good, I would say
Yeah.
Seedborn
could-
over Beast Whisper.
Seedborn is more powerful than Beast Whisper, I think.
Yeah.
So the two of them together make a great pair, I'll tell you that.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, I mean, we'll touch back on this on the podcast here and there as we go about like what we think might need to be added. And I'm sure the problem is that the waters are going to be so muddied with this discussion for so long, the criticisms of this structure. But like one thing that we finished off the End of the 99 podcast with was like, hey, how does this affect you right now? Does it change anything you're doing? And everyone was like, nah, it doesn't really change anything I'm doing. Like,
Yeah.
it's a tool for certain people that are looking for a tool like that.
Yeah.
It's not going to stop. It's not going to, I don't think it's going to inform how I build any deck whatsoever. I don't know if I'm going to be actively trying to stay within the power 3 bracket. I tend to be, especially with now that I've been doing these digital deck techs, I think I'm a high power, especially when it comes to just like, hey, I might just like proxy the whole deck. It's not going to be a 3. It's going to be a 4. Like it's going to be well seated as a 4. And I know that Dan, he was just like, man, every one of my decks is a 3, and like I think I need to build. I'm going to build more 2s. You know, like it's. Oh, that's another thing I wanted to bring up was the fact that we have 5 brackets, with like different parameters. We essentially have 5 formats that like people can metagame for the best of each tier. That are going to like, there's people that are going to try and pub stomp at 2 within the rules completely, and like, it will be. That's the thing that's going to be difficult.
That's the big thing is
that's my Helga, baby.
Within the rules doesn't mean that that's still a 2. Just because it fits as a 2 doesn't mean that it's a 2.
Yeah, especially precisely because, well, I guess 2, it's exhibition is the one where it's like you shouldn't be thinking of winning very hard. This is the I want to show off with goofy stuff. Yeah. Right? And that for sure, if you have people trying to win in bracket 1, that's plain and simple just an arsehole, right? Like it's just person's a jerk. But it's going to be, so we've got MagicCon Chicago coming up, and that was the one where they were like, we wanted to get this out before Chicago so that we could play test it in the wild, and that was what they wanted to try and do with Vegas last year, but it was like, it's not ready. I'm really, really curious because now they've got the command zone and they've got everything that is going to, they're going to structure an event that is going to have matchmaking with this system. And I think we kind of just need to wait until then to see how everybody's response and critique of how it went is going to go. I think it's my guess, if I have to say, is that it's going to be the same old people that are honest are going to be honest, and people that are dishonest are going to be dishonest. And I'm hoping it helps people somehow.
I think overall it's going to help people. I think whatever test that they do in Chicago is going to I think it's going to be exactly what they need it to be, a test, and I think it's going to go absolutely fucking horribly in the good way, where it's going to give them the information that they need. Because I think exactly like you said before, a couple of people are going to come up with like the definition of just like, this is a CEDH level, but fits into bracket 3 deck. And they're going to sit down and just trounce everybody else. Or maybe there's 2 people that do that and they go head to head kind of thing. I think that they're going to get the statistics that they do need to do a lot more balancing.
Yeah, because that's going to be an event with a prize wall, right?
Yeah, exactly. I'm realistically all for this, especially when it comes to like, they've been very vocal of like, this is more so for newer players or people who don't fully understand the whole scope of Magic to have a better idea of building their deck and what to expect. I think that's great, and it is exactly something the game has needed. I think that the realistic future is that there's going to be a fine balance between the old way that people did of like the power 1 to 10 and then the bracket system. Because I don't see myself as is, and who knows what it'll be like in a year. I don't see myself as is ever relying on the bracket system when it comes to building decks. I build my decks how I want to build my decks. I recently put Storm Force of Nature together, which, guess what? No, it got fairly called a bracket 4.
Oh,
It got fairly
Okay.
called. It's the only deck that I've built on Moxfield that is fairly considered. And that's the thing that worries me though, is because if I slot in 6 cards, it's a turn 3 win almost on the regular kind of deck.
yeah, that's pretty high power. That card,
that's
man.
pretty
Why did they print that card?
I mean, putting Storm as an effect that you give to your cards as soon as you deal combat damage was always going to be broken. It didn't matter.
Oh yeah.
I don't know if Tanner, you'd heard about this. Got to playtest it the other day. The homies let me use Brady's tablet to just kind of like, hey, they're playing paper. I was playing it.
Just do
Turn
some
5.
like gold fishing.
Yeah. Turn 5. Well, it's like we were playing an actual game. It was just because I don't have it in paper yet.
I see.
I was playing on Moxfield, like their deck tester.
Yeah.
Turn 5. I chained into Storm Count 9. I took 9 extra combats. And then that proceeded to me being able to cast another extra combat spell, which became 90 extra combats. All
Wait,
on one
90?
turn. 90 extra combats on one turn.
Oh, did you play it out?
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. It was good. It was juicy.
Yeah. Oh, this is going to be very interesting, man. Seeing, like, I guess this is big news because it's the biggest news in the Commander thing.
Mm-hmm.
But I guess it's not really changing a whole lot, right?
No.
I think it'll have good waves, but
yeah, I mean, I know Asuka has been fairly evaluated at a 5, and it has a salt score of 80, which is exactly, honestly, my only thing that I regret about that is that it doesn't have a salt score of 100. That's the.
I don't know if it's possible, really. You'd have to have like every land would have to be the salty
deck.
cards. Yeah.
Yeah, I don't think it would be a functional deck if it had a salt score of 100, but we got as close as we could.
Speaking of something that it will change, though, is the fact that they used the word unban like 8 or 9 times in the article, and everybody's freaking out, and the prices are spiking on cards that they're speculating on coming off the ban list.
Do I get my Dockside back? I hope so.
Probably.
I think Dockside's probably
Jeweled
one.
Lotus?
Yeah, Jeweled Lotus.
It has to, because it doesn't get. It cannot be played in any other format.
I could see Jeweled Lotus coming off because it would be restricted to tier 3 and above, right? Or bracket 3 and above. The thing is, though, like, they're going to get in so much deep water over market speculation or like market manipulation if they unban right away.
Oh yeah.
And I mean, oh god, people are going to hate them so much because, like, when we were talking to Dan, he was saying his brother works at a local magic shop, and there was somebody that came in that wanted to offload all of their Jeweled Lotus, all their Dockside, and everything. And the store was like, no, we're not buying them. It's too volatile. We're not buying them right now. And I guess the employee was just like, do you mind if I buy them? And he was like, go nuts, man. And he's buying them for 10 or 20 bucks a piece.
Yeah.
And if they come off the ban list, that's crazy.
Oh yeah. I mean, I don't encourage it, but I wouldn't be surprised if. I don't know if all of them are. I wouldn't be surprised if some of them come off the ban list. Nadu's staying banned. That's guaranteed. They're not a chance they're touching that with a 10-foot pole.
Get out of here, bird.
Exactly. I could see Jeweled Lotus becoming unbanned. I could see Dockside becoming unbanned. It might just be one of those cards that they have to reevaluate slightly differently. Like, this is an extra game changer. It's not even just a regular game changer.
Oh my
it's
god,
like
another tier.
I wouldn't even say another tier, just another stipulation, right? We're in beta. They're gonna add more things for people to it being limited to power, like bracket 3 or above. I could see it being doing, especially like, I don't know. I hope so, at least. I miss my little goblin monkey.
Yeah.
No, that's actually very fair, because there's a ton that's on the ban list that, I mean, Braid's Cabal Minion, maybe.
Yeah.
Who knows? There's
Prophet of Krufix.
Oh yeah.
There's a lot of cards that have been on the ban list for a long time because they've been objectively broken in the past.
Mm-hmm.
That, especially in the current meta of Magic, aren't necessarily broken anymore. Like, Prophet of Krufix is still incredibly strong, but it's not the same broken that it was back when it was originally printed.
One of the things,
Lutri.
one of the things that Daquan said was that it is kind of a resounding in agreeance within the Commander format panel that there is for sure cards that can be unbanned because now they have sort of like a soft tier ban list that they can work with. And there's cards that are on the ban list that could very well just be more appropriately placed there. So that's why they've been talking about unbans. He did say that they do not currently have any cards selected. They just have opinions, right?
Yeah.
So, but they did say April something, and we're going to get unbans. So I guess that has to be probably after the Chicago MagicCon.
Yeah, probably.
Yeah, but we'll see.
Yeah, we'll see. It's going to be the next year of Magic is going to be an interesting sphere of events. I'm excited though. I think this is overall a healthy move in the right direction. Right now, you'd never assume so, looking at how online is being treated and the amount of jokes that people are making about the bracket system. I do think that overall this is going to be good for the health of the game.
Yeah, and it will be good for the health of the game. And what I want to promise myself that I'm going to do, and is what I encourage everyone else to do, is take part in the beta and give them your feedback. Like, think about it. Don't just emotionally like throw like, poo at the wall. Just like actually sit down and think how you think they could make it better and send it in. And I don't know where the link is or where they're taking that feedback right now yet, but I'm sure there will be an easy place to give your feedback. Please just give your feedback. That's what I'm going to do.
One thing that we should do, as just kind of an alluding to maybe a little prospect future here on the channel, I think we should kind of, when we go into recording games in the future, which for anybody watching, we still have a backlog of games, so if this idea does happen, it's not going to happen for probably another couple of months or something. Probably by the time that we see the ban list get changed in April. We should continue to do the structure that we normally do when it comes to like choosing decks to go against each other on the channel. But maybe we start the game also including where the bracket list of those specific decks are. Because even if they're, hey, this is said to be a bracket 4, but I think it's a bracket 2. And that way we can kind of, I don't know, another little extra step where if anybody's watching, it gives a little bit more information of the difference between what the bracket means right now compared to what we think our decks are.
Yeah, totally.
Fair.
Cool.
And honestly, one of the things that I want to leave on is don't just because we have the brackets is no reason to not use your brain. Brain before brackets. So
brain before brackets. Oh my God, it's the new Rogues Passage shirt slogan.
Hell yeah, brains before brackets.
and so, I mean, brackets are fantastic. Love that we have that something to go off of, but it is no substitute for using your head. Yeah. So just, think beforehand and play accordingly.
Yeah, and have fun.
Yeah, no, fun is the most important thing. If you're not having fun, you're not doing it right. So do it right.
Yeah. Adding on to that, turn zero discussion. Always make sure that when you sit down with your pod, even if it's just a little like, hey, I'm playing a deck that's I'm trying to draw my whole deck and it has no win con. I just want to draw every card and that's no win. Sit down, talk about that. I'm trying to play CEDH, but there's no tutors. There's no that like. Turn zero discussion is number one with brackets, with old power levels. Just have that talk.
Cool. Well, thanks for sitting down and chatting with me. I guess, use your head. Enjoy the brackets or completely cast them away if you don't want to use them. But have fun playing Magic. And we here at the Rogues Passage, we love you. So we'll see you on the next episode. Bye-bye.
Bye.